A few years ago, Dr. Gary Chapman wrote the book 5 Love Languages, based on his experience as a relationships counsellor. But the ideas behind it, as are suggested in the books, which do admittedly focus on relationships, are applicable beyond romance. In the book I read, for example, he refers to visiting a friend in a different country and culture and the meaningful gift which he was given. I do recommend visiting the website and purchasing one of the variations of his book. There are a number of different contexts. He suggests that the way we prefer to be shown how much we are loved by a fellow human being differs from person to person. We all need loving, and love isn't like a camel that can store away until needed. We need regularly to experience love as a human being. Here are the 5 languages he suggests exist, but explains that even in the languages, they have their own dialects. We won't look too closely at the dialect side of things, though, as I think it would make the session too long, although you can dig into that in the books. So some thoughts behind each of these to give you some context for the next conversation. Physical touch. Perhaps the most challenging of all the different ways of showing love and care in a time when we are physically distanced. But it isn't impossible and shouldn't be ignored. Let me give you an idea of what you could do in a moment, since it's the hardest to get your head around. I hope that in the 4th conversation, we'll be able to get some ideas from each other. The heart of it's quite similar to gifts, which is also coming up, because it involves giving something which is tactile and symbolic of care. It will always be hardest for someone whose primary love language is touch, in a world where we are not easily able to give hugs, but perhaps we could give other tactile things. It's worth keeping in mind that touch is kind of shorthand for the bigger idea. This is about the senses, so smell, hearing and sight are also very important. Taste is there, but again, perhaps a bit tricky at the moment. And not to downplay it, but I do wonder if there is something we could learn from babies. Why do we give them cuddly toys, right from when they're infants? And that is very ancient. Giving something to hold seems to soothe a child, be it a security blanket or a bear. Why holding a thing helps soothe someone? The key is to whatever we give, it should touch the need to have personal meaning, which will connect them to you. It's not perfect, but it does help. So a little bit of an example or two. When talking or emailing, you can express a way in which you wish you could hug someone. An air hug if you're physically present, which admittedly does make you look like a bunch of seals, but from a personal experience, it's a very good second best. You could send photos of yourself, if you're close enough, or perhaps a favourite animal which the other person likes. Actually, send a photo that you've printed off, not just an email attachment, as it becomes something more tangible that somebody can get in the post. It might seem a bit, hey, look at me, and maybe self-indulgent, but for the person who is longing for a human connection, it's something very tangible and meaningful. You could trace your hand on a piece of paper and send it so that the friend can put their hand on it when they need physical touch. Handwritten letters are even more meaningful in a digital age. You could give a gift of a scarf, perhaps that someone could wear. If you're close enough to the person, you could even wear the scarf yourself for a while before sending it to them, and then it will smell of you. Sounds a little strange, but in actual fact, this is the kind of thing which I've been told has really helped people. Another idea which I've heard is to have a pillow printed with a photograph on it, which you can give as a gift. You can go on various different websites to find that. And this is particularly special for grandparents when they can't hug their children. So a virtual hug, a personal photo, not just an email attachment, a photo of a favourite animal perhaps, trace your hand on a piece of paper, a handwritten letter, a gift of a scarf or a blanket, and a pillow printed with a photograph. Great for grandparents. I do recommend finding people who have a preference for touch and start building a library of ideas. So gifts can seem a bit materialistic, even selfish, to like having presents, but it's not. However, the price of the gift needs to be weighed quite carefully. I'll come to that in a moment. Gifts are a way of creating a tactile way of expressing symbolically, I was thinking of you. The person receiving the gift will be able to hold it and look at it, remembering the time and place the person was and the reason for the gift, and it's very meaningful to them. So the value. I have had a very wealthy friend who gave me a very wealthy gift, and I love gifts, but I found it so hard to be able to come to terms with that I could never give anything equivalent back to them, and it created a strange power thing between us which should never have been there. That said, if someone gives something cheap and nasty when they could very easily have afforded more, that can also have an impact on a person. Doesn't bother me, but on other people it might. Me, I love small things, silly things preferably. I have a things shelf, which you saw in the video earlier, which is covered in small things people have either made me or given or found. I have my son's pictures on there, and a guitar carved by a 12-year-old lad. He's now 24. I taught him to play. There's some chainmail, which a friend made for me. He thought I was mad. He did reenactment type stuff and made it quite easily. But I hadn't got a clue how to make such a thing. It's just a strip of chainmail, but it's incredibly tactile, and it means a lot. And I remember him every time I pick it up. So for me, no matter how wealthy you are, give me a cheap gift that I can remember you by. Oh, and it has to be unexpected. That's my dialect, you see. This highlights the idea of dialects. So gifts to me are cheap or even found, unexpected, something you have spent time over and will fit on my things shelf. But I'm also a touch person. But I only like being hugged by my wife and my children, which means the tactile nature of a gift is very important to me, and I will often just stand by my things shelf and pick something up to hold. Other people who have a preference for gifts may have other criteria somewhere in them, which make the gift most meaningful. I've just thought about it a lot. Don't forget the gift of self as well. Giving yourself in time. These things overlap. So the gift of time. Try being with someone, spending time with them. It's about giving undivided attention and caring for someone. This in itself is a gift. You're giving yourself. When you are with someone, then the emphasis is on why you are together, not the actual what. So both kind of have an agreement that you're going to do this thing together as long as at least one of you enjoys it. Encouragement is a big thing. I love encouraging people. It's the thing I seem to do most naturally. So I'm somebody who prefers getting a gift, but I love encouraging others. I do like encouragement, but encouragement is the primary way I show I care. It comes from the idea of affirmation, but I think that a hearty well done is sometimes a bit weaker than encouraging a person to look forward and see what might lie ahead. That said, letting someone know that they have done well or look great and so on shouldn't be second place. Being specific with what you're affirming is also important, I think. So saying, hey, you're great, or hey, you've got this, is nice, but better perhaps is, hey, you're great because, or hey, you've got this because, well, you can, and so on. If you aren't someone who personally sees that being encouraged has much worth to you personally, then you could keep a notebook, and when you hear someone being encouraged, you could write it down as an idea. It's worth saying as well that you aren't being false to communicate care in a way that isn't you. You might feel that you aren't being particularly genuine if you don't feel what you're doing, but if the person getting it really values it and maybe knows you aren't a natural encourager, it will mean even more. Or in my case, I'm not a natural hugger with people other than my own family. So when people get hugs, they go, oh, I wasn't expecting that. Another idea I've tried and works well is indirect affirmation or encouragement. So tell other people something encouraging about someone else. Eventually it'll get back to the person in terms of, oh yes, Andy speaks very highly of you, or something like that. However, don't skip on telling the person to their face as well. Otherwise it can end up with a feeling of, well, why didn't they tell me directly? So see that as an added bonus. And finally, serving. Or rather acts of service, doing things for the other people that they would like you to do. So, in the lockdown we've had, serving people by doing the shopping, gardening, getting prescriptions and so on has been something the church has been awesome at doing. But so have other community people as well. I think it's important that in all of these things we don't imagine that only the church does this. We don't have the monopoly on being human. So lots of people get involved and we can join in with that. I would add, though, that despite serving being a very important part of what it means to be a Christian, it doesn't always come easily. And for those for whom it doesn't come easily, it can quickly feel guilt-inducing. So in other words, if somebody doesn't feel like they're very good at serving others by doing something for them, or feels uncomfortable about doing things in that way, and everybody else in the church is getting involved in it, it can feel quite horrible. So a good way of looking at the serving aspect is to consider one's own gifts and skills and offer and look for the ways in which to use them. I find it very uncomfortable to offer to get someone shopping, go visiting, knock on doors, and a whole host of useful Christian stuff, which ministers are expected to do. But as an artist, well, that's different. I find it very easy to help people by knocking out a picture to create a visual representation of what they're thinking of. Just recently, I've created a logo for somebody and worked with a band to help them in their ministry and did a logo for them. There are a whole load of things which I can do, which I find very natural. I can produce images and put images to people's ideas, which really helps people. And I find that it actually, in some ways, somehow, it helps people at a moment in their lives and spiritually to move forwards. I have no idea how that works, but because I think I've offered my art ability to God, it seems to make sense, and this is how I serve others. So instead of thinking narrowly about what service might look like, food banks or after school clubs, all of those kind of things, which actually are very important. And if as a church you can do that, then do it. But if you're a church who is what we might call resource poor or hasn't got all the things that they wish they could do, have a look for the things that you can do and build ministry around those.